Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the days of the kingdom. La Last time we looked at the sin of witchcraft, and we saw how David had ran to Achish, the king of the Philistines, to escape Saul, and how he kind of told a lie by omission, where he was going, he was going in the south of Judah, and so on and so forth. That's where he went, but he left the impression he was attacking the people of Israel and their allies, when actually the enemies of the Philistines he was killing was the Amalekites and their allies. So this emboldened Achish to decide to try to attack Israel, because ever since Samson had brought down the house, they'd want to regain that rule they once had over Israel. Not just oppress them, not just the oppression with raids and stuff, but they actually get back over to ruling over Israel once again. And when Achish had gathered an army, and when Saul saw that, he was terrified, and he ran to consult a witch. And we discussed this about the sin of witchcraft throughout most of it, and showed how really it's prevalent from the Word of God in America. It's all over the place, and it's even because rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and that's rejection of the Word of God, and it's even prevalent in congregations who call themselves followers of Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, Yahshua, however you like, where they meet on the Sabbath or on Sunday. Now, the day we're going to look at, we're going to look at the mighty men of David. As we said, when David went there, and told him this, it set a series of events into play. And one of those things was David had asked to go to Ziklag instead of living in the royal city. Him and his by now 600 men all packed there into Ziklag. They give a little village, and it was called Ziklag, that they went to. And that's where we're going to pick up. That's where we're going to pick up today. And we begin here in the day we're going to look at the mighty men, these mighty men, because this is really a turning point for David. It looks bad, but God's going to work it out for good, as we'll see. Now, in First Samuel 29, verse 1 through 5, we read the following. Now the Philistines gathered together all their armies to Aphek, and the Israelites pitched by a fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed on by the hundreds and by the thousands, but David and his men passed on in the rearward with Achish. And then said the princes of the Philistines, What do these Hebrews here? And Achish said to the prince of the Philistines, Is not this David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, which has been with me these days or these years? And I have found no fault with him, since he fell on me this day. And the prince of the Philistines were wroth with him, and the prince of the Philistines said to him, Make this fellow return, and may go to his place, which you have appointed him. Let him not go with us down to the battle, lest in the battle he be an adversary to us. For wherewith should he reconcile himself to his master? Should it not be at the heads of these men? Is this not David, who they sang one to another in dances, saying, Saul slew his 1,000, and David his 10,000s? Okay, so and what's going on here is they're having a military march before they go, and they're all marching in their units. Okay, perhaps a little parade through the town and the countryside, and it's just to make really sure everyone's mustered together as much as anything. And David is in the back part with Achish. Achish had made him keeper of his head, the head of his bodyguard. So David and his men have this place of honor, really, of guarding Achish, but the prince of the Philistines think do not trust him. Even do not trust him. They think he's gonna they think they know he's in bad sorts with Saul, and they think he's going to turn on them to get back in the good grace with Saul's what it amounts to. That's what it amounts to. And they think that because, of course, that's a reference back to Goliath when he killed Goliath. You know that the David's dangerous. They understand he's much mightier than Saul, and they just don't trust they don't trust him to stand by them and be loyal to them at all. We're gonna look at Achish's response to this and see what he does about this. And as we continue on here in 1 Samuel 29, verses 6 through 8. And Achish called David and said to him, surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and you're going out and you're coming in to me with all the hosts is good in my sight. For I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming into me to this day. Nonetheless, the Lord's favor you not. Now return and go in peace, that you displease not the lords of the Philistines. And David said to Achish, but what have I done? What have you found in your service, as long as I've been with you to this day? I may not go fight against the enemies of the Lord my king. Okay, so now notice I want you to notice the influence at first of all, the influence David's had on Achish. Notice he doesn't swear, but he doesn't make an expression of sincerity based on the name of the Philistine god. You know, but rather by the Lord God of Israel. And so David's had some influence on him. He's highly favored by Achish, but but he can't just ignore what well, he cannot just ignore what this these Philistine these lords of the Philistines don't trust him. I mean, I mean, it'll cause tension, and they might turn on David and end up with infighting inside their group, and you can't, or they're definitely holding this over him. They're kind of forcing his hand, and we'll see that very plainly here in a minute. So David, well, wants really what I want to know is this questions is, does Achish think he's this loyal to him, except he thinks he won't go fight. He won't go fight against the enemies of the king, which would be Israel. Except, well, now this is what Achish says in his answer here in 1 Samuel 29 verses 9 through 11. Read the following: Achish answered and said to David, "I know that you are good in my sight, as an angel of God. Notwithstanding, the princes of the Philistines have said, he will not go up with us to the battle. Now rise early in the morning, and with my father, your master's servants, there come to you, and be as soon as you be up early in the morning, and have light, depart." So David and his men rose early in the morning to depart, I mean, to depart in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel. Okay, so we can see this is in their march. They perhaps went a day or two's away. Well, you'll see why I said that in a minute. But the bottom line is, he will not go up to battle with us. And this, the implication here is that what he's saying is he's not going to have an army. It's just going to they're not going to go to this battle with him if he brings David. I mean, they're adamant about it. Either he goes or we go, but we're not. But we will not go up there with him. And again, forced Achish's hand here. And he just explains that to David and tells him what he wants to do in light of that. Now, really, this was God's hand here, keeping David from having to fight against the people of Israel. David was in a bit of a quandary here. It made an oath of allegiance to Achish, and perhaps he didn't really want to fight against Israel, but perhaps but nonetheless, he had to keep his oath of allegiance, and perhaps he would have, God was using to kill some of the children of people of Belial, sons of Belial among the people of Israel, or something. Who knows? But God got him out of this fix. Okay, David got out of this fix because of these accusations, which David's protest was showing are false. Okay, he's not going to just turn on. He's not going to turn on Achish. He's made him his bodyguard, and so there's a little this agreement kept David from having to fight against Israel, whom God said he'd be king over one day. Again, that's the first example. The situation looks bad, but it's not. And it turns out David really is going to need to go. This is all going to work out for David's good as it continues. Now, here's one thing that worked out for it's already worked out. It's already been working out for his good after he moved to Ziklag. And there's a little background information we read here that has gone on because David after Goliath has inspired other people in Israel, not as a fight with Saul, who didn't really inspire people to threaten them except to, basically use a draft to build an army, but to act on their own to start fighting back against their oppressors. And this is one of these in 1 Chronicles 5, verse 8 through 10, we read about some of these who did this. And Bela, the son of Azaz, the son of Shema, the son of Joel, who dwelt in Aaror, near even unto Nebo and to Baal Meon, and these two inhabit into the entering of the wilderness from the river Euphrates, because their cattle was multiplied in the land of Gilead. In the days of Saul, they made war with the Hagarites, who fell by their hand, and they dwelt in their tents throughout all the east, all the east land of Gilead. Okay, so what we have here is that they've grown, and in this area here, some of it. Remember, they had never driven out the Amorites and Canaanites, and like they were supposed. It's on the east side. They had actually driven them out. Well, they left those unoccupied, and those Amorites moved back in. Well, Hagarites had also moved in, and I'll explain. And Rapson even drove out some of the people they failed to drive out themselves. Now, Hagarites, there's Hagar. Hagar, that's Ishmael's mommy. Abraham, Ishmael's father was Abraham, and Hagar was his. Well, he became his wife. His hand is it was Sarah's handmaiden. They had Ishmael through. Well, the Hagarites or Hagar belonging to Hagar were half brothers to Ishmael, sons of them, who came through Hagar. She either remarried someone or at least had children fathered by someone else. And so they're not they're separate from Ishmael, but they're related to him. Well, now they had moved into these areas, but now they're emboldened, and they because this is inside the promised land, and so now they're emboldened to make war in the days of Saul. This is, of course, after David had inspired them again with Goliath, and we'll see, the inspiration of David here involved a little bit more. And notice how far it goes. The entering into the wilderness from the river, from the entering into the wilderness from the river of Euphrates. So there's this wilderness that borders the wilderness, and they're right up there against it. They're practically to the Euphrates River. Okay, they're very close. And and this is the land of Gilead, the Euphrates rivers. Well, that might be part of it right there. And so this is wilderness area here, and they've gone up here practically to the Euphrates River. Okay, it's one of the bounds of the Promised Land, and they've taken this, and they've been emboldened again. As I'll show, and we'll show a little more definitively that David's the reason they're emboldened. Now we're gonna read about who's involved with them, because all we've really read about so far is just this one group here. This one group here, but it spreads. This removing the Hagarites out of the promised land spreads on the east side. And here's what we read in First Chronicles 5, verses 18 through 22. And the sons of Reuben and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, of valiant men able to bear the buckler and the sword, and to shoot with a bow, and skillful in war, were 44,770, 760, okay, 760 that went out to war. And they made war with the Hagarites, with Jeter and Nephesh and Nodab, and they were helped against them, and the Hagarites were delivered into their hand, and all is with them, for they cried to God in battle, and he was entreated them, because they put their trust in him. They took away their cattle, 50,000, of the sheep 200,000, 250,000, of the asses 2,000, and of men 100,000. For many fell down slain, because the war was of God. And they dwelt in their steads with until the captivity. Okay. So what we see here once again is, now notice, it's the whole it's the whole everyone on the east side. It started this little group here, but now it's everyone on the east side has been inspired to raise an army, at least men from all three tribes over there. And again, it's 44,000, 4 and 40,000, so 760 that went out to war. It's a sizable army. And God helped them, and they were helped against him. And the Hagarites, and who did they get their help from? They cried to God in there. They have turned to God. Remember, the first time they were Saul and saw the Philistine army coming, they just ran away, and led to Saul taking matters in his own hands, trying to get him to come back. They were all afraid when Goliath showed up. But after David killed Goliath, remember, everything turned. They were now emboldened and chased the Philistines for quite a way, for quite a ways. Well, now, so they've been emboldened now, and their trust is back in the Lord. As we saw, that pattern throughout Judges that just ended with on the Philistine invasion. What happened before was Israel would cry out, they'd repent, God would deliver them completely from it. And they really didn't start doing that till the time of Samuel. So now, but now they've been emboldened and they're starting to and their trust has gotten back into God. They saw how God delivered Goliath into the hand of David. And notice this war was of God. Why was this war of God? Because these Hagarites didn't belong in the promised land. At the end of the day, we still have the same problem of Arabs trying to move into the promised land, into the land of Israel. And there's a turning to God in Israel today, too, because of this war that's been going on there for 2 years. And people are, there's so out of what's bad, God's bringing something good there today as well. So, and notice that this is a men 100,000. It means they were probably slaves, or perhaps they took them as captives. And 50,000 camels. It tells us they probably had an army of 50,000, or maybe a little bit more. Remember, and there's some donkeys and camels. Most likely they were riding around on camels. Gives you an idea of the size of their army. So they've been emboldened, but now, after David goes to Ziklag, we're going to see what we're going to see. We're going to see what happened after David didn't go with Saul, perhaps even more precisely in the timing. Here's what we read in 1 Chronicles 12:19. There fell some of Manasseh to David when they came with the Philistines against Saul to battle, but they helped them not. For the lords of the Philistines were advisement upon and sent him away, saying, he will fell our master Saul to the jeopardy of our heads. Okay, some of these people who were emboldened here, they were half tribe Manasseh, came to David. Perhaps when they saw him turn around and go home, they joined him. Okay, now we're going to read what occurs when David gets back to Ziklag with these new recruits, as it were, in 1 Samuel 30, 1 through 5. And it came to pass, David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Philistines invaded the south in Ziklag and smitten Ziklag and burned it with fire. And had taken the captives the women that were therein. They slew not any, nor either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burnt with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voice and wept, but they had no more power to weep until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captive. Ahinoam, the Israelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. Anyway, while they notice on the third day, so they've been marched out there a day, perhaps a day and a half. He's supposed to go home, or perhaps the third day. It took him 3 days to get back, so he's gone. Perhaps it took 3 days to get there, 6 days. Well, while he's gone, and there's nothing left in the villages. It's just a village. It's not even walled. Not even called a walled town. At least this time, it's defenseless, more or less. from the and the Amalekites came from the south. They're out. Remember, they live south outside the boundaries of the promised land. They've cut, and they're just raiders all the time, and invaders. And they raided and burnt. And they struck Ziklag and burned with fire. But they didn't kill anyone. They took them all captives instead. And they use as slaves. They're more likely to sell as slaves. They tend to be very nomadic on the travel lights. So their question of who they're going to keep, who they're going to keep them versus selling. But we'll see how well they treat their slaves in a moment here. But and here's the thing: David and them don't know where they went. They don't know the secret hideouts, strongholds, and the like of the Amalekites. Saul was supposed to go down there and wipe them out completely in the first battle. In the first battle, he didn't know what he was supposed to do, and the campaign was never completed to destroy them. If it had been, of course, this wouldn't have happened. But nobody knows exactly, they're nomadic, and nobody knows where they're moving at any time. It's not like they have a capital city where Dave and them can go. So they don't know where their wives are, just out in the wilderness somewhere. And and how are they gonna, and they recover them? I mean, how are they gonna get them? And the belief is they're never gonna see them again. And that's why they cried. And notice Abigail, the wife and the ball. Well, she's David's wife, and she's called that because she had been the wife of Nabal, but he died. And remember what Scripture says: a woman is bound by the law to her husband as long as they both live. But if her husband dies and she marries another, she's not an adulteress, even though she's married to another. So David's not, committing adultery here, not violating what Messiah said in Matthew chapter 18 about marrying another man's wife. I just want to make that clear here because people have looked at that and said, "See, David married someone else's wife." Well, no, he died, as we saw before. Well, let's continue here in 1 Samuel 30, verse 6 through 10. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray you bring me to here the ephod. And Abiathar brought to there the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? And shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue. We shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David and his men, 100 men, went with him and came to the brook Besor, where they were left where that were left behind stayed. And David pursued he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which was faint, they could not go over to the brook Besor. Okay, remember, these men from Manasseh have just joined him. He hadn't trained them. They don't know how he has things organized. They're going to take some acclimation time for them to be part of the army. So he didn't take them. We read they had come by this point. But he's taken the 600 men he's been with. And yeah, they walked 3 days, and now they're tired. But notice David was greatly distressed. And notice how everyone, they're grieved, and notice how they turn on him. And this is the way people are often. David's a scapegoat, in what we'd say here in America here. They're scapegoating David. David didn't do this evil. The Amalekites did. David was leading them following orders, just as he had been doing the whole time, and they've been following him. But people, when they're hurt, when they're hurting, want someone to blame, they can take retribution on, and often that person had absolutely nothing to do with the problem. And and David, of course, has also lost his wives. They're not the only ones hurting; he is too. But notice what he does. He encouraged himself in the Lord as God, and that's what we need to do when we are distressed. I mean, this looks bad. Okay, the people, not only has he lost his wives, he's in danger of losing his life. It looks like, and he turned to God. And when everyone turns against you, you need to turn to God. God will help you if you've been faithful to Him. And notice what he said. And notice David says to Abiathar the priest. We see him once again. Abiathar doesn't inquire the Lord for him. David inquires again. This is the third time this has happened. He wants to bring the ephod, that's a linen garment the priest wears. And nowhere does it ever say David puts this on, but perhaps he puts his hands on it or just holds it in his lap. But he's connecting himself to the covenant God gave through Moses by touching this ephod, symbolic of the priesthood, okay, or used for the priesthood. The garment is holy, so now David is, as it were, sort of like staying on holy ground, like Moses had, has made this holy connection. It's not the ephod is a charm or something. There's no way to divine with it or anything like that. It's just a piece of cloth that you know it's a like a vest kind of. It's just white linen, but it puts him closer to God. He's drawing close to God. And notice and those are the Lord tells him to do. David doesn't just assume get up and just run after this troop. He asks the Lord if he should do it first, and asks if he's going to be successful. And the Lord's answer is yes and yes. Well, it's not hard to understand why these 200 men were tired. They were all tired, but they just couldn't go any further. So now David leaves them behind, and we'll see they're guarding the stuff, which means these other 400 men are now able to take their backpacks off, except they don't know how long they're going to be, but they can leave with these 200 men, and now lighten a load for them to go fight, pursuing unencumbered. They'll be able to pursue faster and have more strength left when they get there, and it'll be less awkward in general. Okay, now we're going to continue on in 1 Samuel 30 verses 11 through 15. Because remember, the Lord said he's gonna overtake them and recover everything, but he doesn't know exactly where they are. Just knows they're south. But the Lord's already provided for him, as we read here. There's already set up provision for this, as we read here in 1 Samuel 30 verse 11 through 15. They found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread. He did eat. They made him to drink water. They gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him. For he had eaten no bread nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. David said, To whom belongeth you? And from where are you? He said, I am a young man of Egypt, a servant of an Amalekite. My master left me because 3 days agone, I fell sick. 3 days ago, I fell sick. And we made an invasion upon the south of the Kerethites, and the coast which belongs to Judah, into the south upon the south of Caleb, and we buried Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, Can you bring me down to this company? He said, Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring you down to this company. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, not a good treatment of their slaves. My master, this guy had been a slave to this Amalekite, a young man of Egypt. Perhaps they bought him, but Egypt was right there, not the part that's on the today on the misnamed Sinai Peninsula, just right over there, not far away. They more likely they just kidnapped him or killed his parents and took him took him for a slave or whatever the case was. And notice when he got sick, I mean, this is cruel. He just left him there to die of thirst and hunger. It'd been kinder to have killed him with his sword. But this Amalekite has no concern for the welfare of anyone. And it's not just him, it's that spirit of Amalek that's everywhere. I mean, when you, as prevalent and still is there today, like among Hamas. They don't care about they don't care how many, they don't care how many people in Gaza that aren't part of them get killed. Heck, the ones in charge don't even care about other members of Hamas. I mean, them get killed. You know, they just want to bring death and destruction to other people. And how many of them die? How many of them die in the process? Who else gets hurt in the process? Is no concern. And that's what these Amalekites are like. You know, they're just not concerned by that. It's like these Amalekites. So notice David wants to know if he can show them where they're hiding out at. And the young man says, "Just don't hand me to my master, kill me, and I'll do this." Because his master he knows is cruel. He lets him out there to die. I mean, 3 days. It's about as long as you can go without drinking water. Okay, he was on the verge of death when David and them came. And who knows what he'd do to him if he knew that David had handed him over there. So that's his that's this deal he offers David so he can bring him. We're gonna look at what occurs next here as we continue in 1 Samuel 30, verse 16 through 20. We brought him down, behold, they spread upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because all the great spoil they taken out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of Judah. And David smote them from twilight even to the evening of the next day. And there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men, which rode upon camels and fled. And David recovered all the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. There was nothing lacking to them, neither great or small, neither sons or daughters, neither spoil or anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all, and David took all the flocks and all the herds which they drove before those other cattle, and said, "This is David's spoil." Okay, so they escaped. So they were totally successful. And notice how they're eating and drinking and dancing. They think they've gotten away. They've successfully have raided. I mean, they went way up into Judah. They didn't just attack the Philistines, Ziklag along the Philistines at the time. They also attacked Judah. As I mentioned before, they were enemies of the Philistines and Judah both. And they were doing exactly what the Prussians and the British were doing on Christmas Day when Washington crossed the Delaware and attacked them. It's the same sort of situation. Because see, America was Christmas was actually outlawed in every state in America until 1834. Americans didn't celebrate it. The first day Congress met was December 25th, right? After we became an actual nation. It was a non-holiday here, and that's why we attacked the British on that day. Because it wasn't our holiday, it was theirs. Well, that's what's going on here. David and them aren't having a holiday. The Amalekites are. They believe they've taken this great spoil from all these places. And why they attack, both the land of the Philistines and the land of Judah? Because they've heard that the Philistines have gathered to go to war against the Israelites, and the Israelites are gathered to war to go against the Philistines. And just as we saw just as they done in the wilderness, where they went and attacked the women and children and the elderly and whatever, and the like, who were defenseless. Because these people were all defenseless because the men on both sides were off to war with each other. So they didn't see it coming. Now, these young men escape. So this is not the end of the Amalekites. And this may not have been the only group of them anyways, but 400 of them escape. Just like there's 400 men from David. And the spoil David keep, and what it means for those other cattle, the other cattle, remember cattle means livestock, okay? This is the cattle, these are the flocks and herds that weren't the part that David and his men already had, those went back to their owners, okay? That those went back, those are going back to Ziklag. Now there's other parts David's spoil, and it's pretty massive for one man, but he has a purpose for it. We'll see, okay? Because this is the turning point in David's fortunes ever since Saul started chasing him. In 1 Samuel 31 and 25, we start reading about how this spoil is going to be divided. And David came to the entire spoil, I'm saying here. And David came to the 200 men, which were so faint they could not follow David, whom they had made also abide the brook Besor. And they went forth David and to meet the people that were with him. And David came near the people and saluted them. Then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial, of those that went with David, and said, because they went not with us, we will not give them all the spoil that we have recovered. So every man his wife and children, and may lead them away and depart. Then David said, you shall not do so, my brethren, that which the Lord has given us, who has preserved us, and delivered this company against us into our hand. For who will hearken to this matter? For as his part went down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarried by the stuff. They shall part alike. And so it was from that day forward. He made a statute and ordinance for Israel unto this day. Okay, notice he calls them men of Belial. That's another word for Satan or the devil. We've seen this expression several times, starting with the end of Judges, concerning like the wicked men of Gilead said. Okay, they're wicked, and what tells they're wicked? They're wicked men of Belial because they don't want to share in the spoil. And this shows they have a wicked heart. Their attitude is, we did this, they didn't, we did the fighting, they didn't. They shouldn't get anything. We won this victory all on our own. Why should we give up some? Why should they get a thing? Well, one reason they could win the victory because these guys were guarding their stuff. It lightened the load. It lightened them up quite a bit. They could travel faster. They could move more stealthily. They could fight easier without everything that wasn't necessary. All they really need to do is carry their sword and their shield and their spear or their weapons and armor, and that's all armor and armament, and that's all they needed. And that was possible because of these guys. But at the end of the day, it's the Lord they gave them the victory. And they're not willing to give credit to God. They didn't even know they were all weeping earlier. Didn't have no idea where their wives and children were, and sure they'd never see them again. So it's really about not recognizing what they have has come from God. So they're selfish with it. And see, that's the truth about everyone. There's some things I can do quite well because I was born with those abilities. I had to enhance them, of course, and develop them. But the Lord gave them to me. You know, a screwdriver doesn't deserve any credit for be able to screw in screws. But if you don't recognize and are selfish and greedy and don't want to share with others, well, share with others who helped perhaps into what you did. You start thinking you're more important than them, and you deserve more than them. The Bible says you're wicked and a child of the devil. Don't be that way. And that's what David has told him here. And notice all the way to this day, and we saw earlier to the leading away the captivity. Remember, these things were written down as they occurred, but they were in a bunch of different scrolls and compiled later into this nice format we're reading. Okay, that's why you'll see these references occasionally to way off, and sometimes it'll seem like it was the right written is it's right is we're hearing someone is right there, and later we'll see some expression that says way off, says much later. Well, both are true. It's just compiled later. Now we continue on in 1 Samuel 30, verse 26 through 31. When David came to Ziklag, he sent Ziklag. He sent the spoil to the elders of Judah, even to his friends, saying, "Throw a present for you of the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. To them which were in Bethel, to them which were in Ramoth, to them which were in Yetor, to them which were in Eror, to them which were in Siphmoth, to them which were in Eshtemoa, to them which were in Rachel, to them which were the Jerahmeelites, to them which were in the city of the Kenites, to them which were in Hormah, to them which were in Khorasan, to them which were in Akthak, to them which were in Hebron, to them which into all the place where David and himself and his men were wont to haunt." So we see that there's nothing selfish about David taking that huge thing for himself, because he didn't intend to keep it for himself. He demonstrated what he just told his men to do. These people had done nothing at that time in fighting the Amalekites and recovering this stuff. But notice the place that him and his men were wont to haunt, they had aided David and his men, had given him a place to stay while he's running away from Saul and carrying out his campaigns against the Amalekites and their allies. So David took this big giant with the intention of giving it away. They remember we saw the amount where they had raided to. These people had suffered as well from these Amalekite raids. They too had been defenseless while their men were out there being gathered to Saul to fight with the Philistines. So David so David David demonstrated what he said, and he shared in the goodness. And that's the way it should be. We should share in the goodness that God's given us. And the number one reason people don't want to do this is a lack of trust in God. They're afraid. What if I need that later? Or sometimes they're just greedy. I want I don't want to help them because I want to use this to help for me to get something I don't really need, but I won't. So I'm not going to spend what I don't want to give what I don't want to give this to help them with their want, with their needs, because I'm more focused on my want. David was exactly the opposite of that. David was a shepherd to sheep, but he became a shepherd of men, just like just like Peter and John became went from being a fishers of fish to fishers of men. So the Lord has made David a shepherd of men, no more sheep. And the shepherd, he's like Messiah, the good shepherd, will lay down his life for the sheep. If you're willing to lay down your life for other people, then you have no problem sharing your stuff with other people. He's the very opposite of those men of Belial who are selfish, thinking only of themselves and wanting to enhance their own self and then care about anyone else. In some ways, more like the Amalekites than they were like David and like God. Now we're gonna read what happens, how it happened to David after he got back to Ziklag after sharing the spoil. And this is in First Chronicles 12, verse 1 through 3. As we said, this is a real turning point for David. It's looked bad, but God's turned it to good, and it's going to be even more so. Now these are they which came to David to Ziklag, while he kept himself close because of Saul the son of Kish. And they were among the mighty men, helpers of the war. They were armed with bows that could use the right and left hand hurling stones and shooting arrows out of a bow, even of Saul's brethren of Benjamin. The chief was Ahiezer, then Joash, then the son of Shem, Shem, Shemaiah, the Gibeathite, and of Jezael, and Pelet, and the sons of Osmaveth, and Baraka, and Jehu, the Antothite, the Antothite. Sorry, Antothite. So, so now notice who's the first one that it's mentioning here. From the tribe of Benjamin, his Saul's brethren, even. And remember, with the whole Gibeon thing, the 600 who put themselves on the rock Rimmon were up there and could sling with a hurl a stone with both hands and not miss a hair's breadth. Okay. Well, they're also now shooting arrows, and that if you think it would be on Saul's side in this matter, it'd be them. We saw where Saul implied, where it was implied Saul had been enriching them and people of his own tribe at the expense of others, and he accused them of turning to David, saying would David do the same thing? Well, David's been poor and beleaguered and running for his life and hiding down there with the Philistines. But when they hear what happened to Ziklag, when they hear what happened after he recovered his loss from Ziklag and shared, they have been inspired to come with him. They're inspired to. They are volunteers to him. Remember when Saul could not get a volunteer army, he had to threaten to kill their oxen. But they are now come down here volunteering to join the army of David, and they're not the only ones. As we continue on we're going to look at some more from Benjamin as we continue on here in First Chronicles 12, verse 4, 7, and 4. 4 through 7. Ishmaiah, the Gibeonite, a mighty man among the 30, and over the 30. And Jeremiah, and Azazel, and Yehonan, and Josaphat, and Josaphat the Githarite, Gitarathite. There we go. Gitarathite. There we go. Gitarathite, and Uluzai, and Uramoth, and Beeliah, and Shemariah, and Shaphatiah, the Harupite, and Elkanah, Elkanah, and Yeshia, and Azariel, and Joezer, and Yashamabim, Biam, the Korites, and and Yoelah, and Zabadiah, the sons of Yoraham of Gedor. Okay, these are cities up there in Benjamin. But I wanted to draw your attention to this first guy here, who's among the 30 and over the 30. And this Gibeonite. Remember, Gibeon, the Gibeons had that city. It was in the territory of Jerusalem, but the Gibeons lived there. The Gibeonites lived there, who came in the league with so sort of after tricking Joshua, came in the league because they feared the Lord God, and then made the lowest water bearers and wood choppers. Well, this Gibeonite is not just one of them. He's among the 30 mighty men of David. There's different groups of these mighty men. The biggest one's 30 group, the group of 30. He's over it. And David accepts him. David does not accepts him because of his skill, and also because of his loyalty to God and his loyalty to him. Now I continue on in First Chronicles, chapter 12, verses 16 and 18. We'll go down a little bit and read about the rest of these from the tribe of Judah. And there came the tribe of Benjamin and Judah to the hold of David. And David went out to meet them and answered them and said, if you be peacefully come to me to help me, my heart shall be knit with you. If you come to betray me to my enemies, say there's no wrong in my hands, the God of our fathers look thereon and rebuke it. Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, who was the chief of the captains. He said, we are yours, David. Yours are we, David, and on your side, you son of Jesse. Peace be unto you. Peace be to your helpers. For your God helps you. And David received them and made them captains of the band. Okay, so these guys are going to become captains of the band, of his band. He's going to put them captains. Typically, are heads of tens or heads of 1,000. I'm sorry, heads of 100 or heads of 1,000, and they've come down here. And notice to the hold unto David. They've come down to Ziklag, his hold down there. He's made a little fortification down there. And they've come down there, and they're from Benjamin, Judah. They're for Saul or not, but they're for him. And those the Spirit of God came upon Amasai. Last time the Spirit of God came upon him was Saul when he was pursuing David and caused him to fall down prophesying for day and night, giving David time to escape. Well, now the Spirit of God came upon another man, to the chief of the captains. Okay, so that implies there's a whole bunch of people behind them, with them as well. Okay, so David's army has grown after Ziklag quite a bit, just from Judah and, well, first some came from Manasseh, as we saw. They hadn't really been able to train him and integrate him in his army yet. But now a big group from Judah and Benjamin being right next to Judah, undoubtedly heard of David's good treatment to the people who had helped him. And they want to be part of that. This is an all-volunteer army, unlike that Saul has. Now, we're going to read out some more about this all-volunteer army. They came after those people from Manasseh, from the east side of the Jordan. And the Gadites, they separated themselves into David, into the hold of the wilderness, men of might and men of war fit for battle. that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were as the face of lions, and as swift as roes upon the mountains. Ezer the first, and Obadiah the second, and Eliab the third, and Mishmana the fourth, and Jeremiah the fifth, Attai the sixth, Eliel the seventh, Johanan the eighth, Elzabad the ninth, Jeremiah the 10th, Machbanai the 11th. All right, so these Gadites come, and they're as face of lions, swift as roes. Kind of gives you the idea, and they bother to name all of them individually. These are like special forces type people, is what the ideal here is, okay? These are your Army Rangers, Navy SEAL, a Green Beret type individuals, okay? And they've come down here to help David as well. And of course, they can train other people, to train more special forces people as well under them. And give David some help in some areas where he's perhaps doesn't even know he's not even aware yet he needs help in those areas, perhaps. But they're there to do it. Okay, to take on those hard missions that other people can't. That not just hard necessarily because you got to be tough to do them, but hard because you got to know how to handle them as well. And these are these type of men. And I misspoke there a second. They are over some people. These are the sons of Gad, captains of the host. One of the least was over 100, and the greatest over 1,000. And when these went all over the Jordan in the first month, these all went over in Jordan the first month. It overflowed its banks. They put to flight all of them of the valleys, both towards the east and towards the west. Okay, they're of that group that we saw who drove out the Hagarites earlier. Okay. And again, fierce and lion, fast. They're brave, they're fast. And again, they kind of have that special forces quality about them, but they brought with them hundreds or thousands, depending on which they are. They're captains of each one's the captain of a host. Okay. So now he's got help from the east side of the Jordan as well, of somewhere, somewhere between the least one's 100, over 100. That's the greatest 1,000. So, somewhere between 1,900 to 10,100 people have joined him. That's under them, not counting them themselves. Now we finish here in Chronicles 12, verse 20 through 21, and we read the following about a summary of all this. And they went to Ziklag, and there fell to him of Manasseh, Abna and Jozabad, and Yadiael, and Michael, and Jozabad, and Elihu, and Zilthai, captains of the thousands that were of Manasseh. They held David against the band of the rovers, for mighty men of valor, and were captains in the host. Okay, we see again another group of thousands. These are all thousands. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, remember David had only 600 men, trained men in his army, had some new recruits from Manasseh. He didn't go with, hadn't gone with him. They came back to Ziklag, and perhaps they left him there to guard what was left of Ziklag. I don't know. But David originally was by himself. They had 200, God said 200 men who helped him. He'd been training them, 600. But now we're talking more in the area of 60,000. Okay. Total. Definitely at least 20,000. But probably more but probably from what we've read, more in a range of 60,000. And as we already saw, about these. They're not just. It's not just numbers that's important. It's the quality of the people involved as well. And we saw there are some high quality, what we'd say today are special forces type individuals, commandos, that kind of thing. Okay, in this army here. So he didn't just have numbers, but he has large numbers of the right kind of people as well. So now we can see people from Benjamin and Judah have come down here. Interestingly, no one from Simeon. Benjamin and Judah have come down here to help him. Gad and from this whole eastern promised land have come down to help David. And who's basically, and who hasn't helped him, loyal to Saul, or perhaps afraid to, is this northern part of the western promised land, and Simeon. But now we're looking at some more of these mighty men of David, we saw that mentioned earlier, why they're called mighty men. And some of the ones that stand out the most, they're head and shoulders above the rest, as it were. And here we read in First Samuel, 23, verse 8 through 12, we start reading about them. These be the names of the mighty men whom David had. The Tachmonite that sat in the seat, chief among the captains. The same was Adino the Eznite. He lifted his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time. After him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of three mighty men with David, when they defied the Philistines, were gathered together in battle, and the men of Israel were gone away. He arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary. His hand clave with a sword. And the Lord brought a great victory that day, and the people returned to him after him only to spoil. After him was Shammah, the son of Agi, the Aharite, and the Philistines gathered together a troop, where was a piece of ground full of lentils. The people fled from the Philistines. He stood in the midst of it and defended it, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great victory. Okay, so these are our first three. This first one, 800 men who slew at one time. Well, this is this is like the acts of the judge, and the Spirit of God fell on them. Shamgar killing 600 with an ox goad. Samson killing 1,000 with a donkey bone. Adino the Israelite is right up there with them. Okay, now this next one here, the people have ran away from the Philistines, the men of Israel. Everyone's running for their lives except this guy. This guy is running towards them. And perhaps there's two other people with him. One of the three mighty men was David when they defied it. Okay, so perhaps and David's with them, and this, of course, obviously before he went to Achish and swore all the loyalty to him. But now, and notice until his hand was weird, till his hand, and he couldn't even open his hand to let go of his sword. His hand cramped up around his sword. It was the Lord wrought a great victory, and the people came back only to spoil. And he let them because he realized the Lord had done this. He hadn't done this all by himself. Now, this next guy down here. Now, there's significance that as they were gathered together into a troop, whereas a ground of lentils. And we see this for the Philistines often raided Israel. And what their pattern was, they'd wait till the crops came in, were harvested, or ready for harvest, but usually wait till they were harvested, and then come in there and steal the harvest. Of course, these lentils were people relied on them. The biggest time they were eating was in the winter. That was part of their winter food to get them over the winter. And the Philistines are there to steal the winter store, and these people are going to go hungry or starve throughout the winter if they do that. But this one man by himself stands against them. And notice the Lord wrought a great victory. He killed the entire troop, however big that was. They didn't get one lentil, not one lentil was stolen. And he saved the people there from hunger and possible starvation in the winter. Now we're going to go to 1 Chronicles 11, verse 10 through 14. We're starting reading about another set of mighty men. These were also the chief of the mighty men whom David had, strengthened himself in his kingdom with Israel to make him king according to the word the Lord had concerning Israel. This is the number of mighty men whom David had. Joshabeam, a Hakmonite, the chief of the captains. He led a spear against 300 slain by him at one time. After him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, who was one of the three mighties. Here's with David at Pasdaim, and there the Philistines gathered together battle where there was a parcel of ground full of barley, and the people fled from before the Philistines. They set themselves in the midst of the parcel and delivered it, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord saved them by great deliverance. Okay, so now we got Joshabeam. And notice this guy, only 300. So try to say he's the same guy here. This guy's 800. And he's got a different name here, except, okay. Chief of the captains. They're both chief of the captains. Captains, okay. Now, it was the same guy. He killed 800 one time and 300 another. But it appears not to be, and we'll see why we said in a minute. Notice the second one here. Now, the one that's listed second this time is Eleazar, the son of Dodo the Edomite. And we see the same name over here. And sword clave to the sword, and perhaps that was the same instance here. He was one of the three mighties. Remember, these three mighties had fought with, they went with David and they defiled him. And this was in Pasdanim, which is called Ephes-danim, the line of blood, where David fought Goliath, where they were gathered to fight Goliath. And remember, the men of Israel were afraid until David took out Goliath. And perhaps during that time they went there, and the ground was full of barley, telling us this in the spring. That other incident we read about, it was full of lentils, telling us a different harvest time altogether, a different harvest. But the same sort of situation. And this time, him and David alone fought and protected this particular one. And the Lord saved them by great deliverance. There's no, then specify they were just gathered there to battle. Okay. There wasn't a troop gathered, but gathered to raid this place. And David them set this and brought this great deliverance, kept them from taking the food. The barley usually held people over. Some of it they put back and might last to the next spring. But his main thing was to hold him off until the wheat harvest came in, which was larger. So again, saved him from hunger, possible starvation. But now we read another one. Abishai, the brother of Joab, he was the chief of the three. For lifting up his spear against 300, he slew them and was at a name among the three. Of the three, he was more honorable than the two, for he was their captain. Howbeit he obtained not to the first three. Okay, so and we can see he's obviously not he's not the son of he's not the same as the Shammah, the son of the Harite, who stood there and defended. He's a brother of Joe. He's a brother of Joab, which means he's David's cousin, because Joab is David's cousin. And he slew them. He's more honorable than the two, than these other two, but it's saying not that he was their captain. Well, these other two here, the chief of the captains, but this group here is over there, but he's over this group. Okay, he's over people outside this group, and Abishai is over him. But notice he's more honorable than the two. However, he did not attain to the first three. The first three are above him, which again seems to indicate they're a different group here. But this one guy, his name appears twice, and we're going to look at, there's an explanation for that, but we're going to look at this at this man at the third one here. So there's three that he's over Abishai. Abishai includes himself and this other man right here. And now this man is outstanding. We got a half a lesson on him, maybe a whole one. He has a long and storied career, as we'll see. But here's what we read about this man in First Chronicles 11. We continue on there, verse 22 through 25. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts. He slew two lion men like men of Moab. He also went down the pit and slew a lion in the pit on a snowy day. He slew an Egyptian, a man of great stature, 5 cubits high. In the Egyptian's hand was a spear like a weaver's beam. He went down with a staff and plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. These things did Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and had a name among the three mighties. Behold, he was more honorable than the 30, but attained not to the first three. And David set him over his guard. Okay, so he's one of these second group of three, as is Amasai. And there's a group of 30, he's more honorable than them. So whom we have in these three is Joshua, being the Hakmonite. This guy's a repeat. He's one of the three mighties, the first three. Josiah and Benani. There's 30 more, and we're going to look at some of these 30 in a moment here. But notice, 2 lion-like men of Moab. Well, what does it mean by that? It means they were fierce and strong and that kind of thing. And he took them both on at once and killed them both. Now notice he went down to the lion in a pit on a snowy day. There's lions down in this pit. It's snowy. There's nothing for it to eat. It's hungry. And he could have got a bow and arrow and shot it and tried to shoot it from there. he jumps right down in there where the lion was. At this point, perhaps nowhere for him to escape to, and kills it. This man is just fearless. Now, notice his next thing. Now, notice these Egyptians, a man of great statue. Now, it doesn't say he's the son of the giants like he did with Goliath, but perhaps. Remember, Goliath we looked at, in reality, it was 4 cubits in a span. The reason it says 6 cubits in a span was because that's what it says. That's what it says in the Masoretic text. But the Septuagint says 4 cubits a span, and the Dead Sea Scrolls says that as well. And as we discussed, everywhere the Septuagint and the Dead in the Masoretic text disagree, the Dead Sea Scrolls come on the side of the Masoretic text every time. So so something's been tampered with. And it's the Masoretic text, but this man is bigger than Goliath. He's 5 cubits tall. That's about that's around 103 inches, which is 8 foot, which is 8 foot 7 inches tall. Yeah, 8 foot 7 inch. No, 8 foot 11 inch. Yeah, 8 foot 7 inches tall. Right, 8 foot 7 inches tall. We're metric about 2.6 meters. Okay, and there's been human beings in modern times have been that tall, but this man and this guy's size, he saw David and Goliath, and he just had no problem with this guy at all. He went down there with a staff, used it perhaps to trip the guy, hit the guy, or perhaps hit him in the throat with it, or whatever he did. And just like David had killed Goliath he cut his head off with his own sword, he cut he used this man's spear, this Egyptian spear, and killed him with it. This guy is just fearless and just not to be messed with. So he had a name among the three mighties. But notice he didn't attain to the first three. And David set him over his guard. Remember, David had made the keeper the head of Achish. Well, now this guy is the bodyguard of David. And as I said, we will see him in action again in future lessons. Now we're gonna look at some of these 30 and some that just stand out for various reasons as we finish our last section, our last section today. The sons of Hashem, the Gizonite. I'm sorry, Gizonite. There we go. Gizonite. Jonathan, the son of Shagi, the Hararite. Hayam, the son of Sakar, the Hararite. Eliphal, the son of Hefer, the son of Mechatharite. Ahijah, the son of the Peleonite. Hezro, the Carmelite. Naarai, the son of Ezbai. Yoel, the son of Nathan. Midhar, the son of Hagari. Zelek, the Ammonite. Naharai, the Berethite. The armor bearer of Joab, the son of Zuriah. Ira, the Etherite. Goreb, the Etherite. Uriah, the Hittite. Zabab, the son of Eliah. Okay, there's some outstanding things I want you to notice here. We're going to go over everyone, but we're going to touch upon. I don't know the expression, the sons of Hashem. In Hebrew, perhaps more of a cultural thing, but certainly inspired by the rabbis. But the word Hashem literally means the name. It is used as a substitute for God consistently, particularly for the Tetragrammaton Yahweh. So these people are the opposite of those sons of Belial we saw earlier. It's not just speaking about, it's not just saying about this one guy's sons having part of the 30. It's about the nature and the character of the 30. They're men of God. They're not like those men of Belial who are selfish and really didn't care. And really, their interest in following David wasn't to fulfill the purpose of God as much as to enrich themselves through war and that kind of thing. But these people are not like that. They have this mindset like David to do the will of God. And notice who's among those is Ziklag the Ammonite. Well, remember the Ammonites were descendants of Lot, and because of mistreatment to Israel at one point, they were under a curse. Yet David has them in his mighty men. Mind you, these mighty men, you can definitely think of all these as being, definitely not just your special forces type, but your toughest ones of the special forces types, okay? The most outstanding ones. And one of them is this man here. Well, David, I'm sorry, that's not right. So David does not care. This is a Gentile without a doubt. Because remember, we read in Exodus 20 and 12, if someone gets circumcised for the purpose of marking them as part of the people of God and commit themselves to keep all those other things that mark them as part of the people of God, not eating unclean food and so on and so forth, they're no longer considered a Gentile. They're considered part of the part. They're considered a Jew. They're considered part, would say today, an Israelite, as if they were native born, as if they were a physical descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, this tells us this guy, since he's called this, has not been circumcised, and they've been at war with these people before. They've been invading, but this man has turned to the living God. And David has no problem having him as one of his mighty men. This is a group he sends out on special missions, things like that. Well, here's another one, Uriah the Hittite. And we'll talk about him more definitely in the future lesson. But notice he's a Hittite. Well, remember the Hittites. That's one of those 7 named Canaanite ethnic groups that came from the Canaanites. Canaanites being the original, then 7 spawned 6 more. That Israel was supposed to push out of the land. Just they could be destroyed or pushed out of the land. There's always been that third option, as I mentioned, which was submit to God and join Israel as gers, as strangers living among them, because it's really never been about race. It's been about religion. Remember, he didn't want them with them, so they wouldn't draw them into the idolatrous religion of the Canaanites. For this guy, son of Hashem, this Hittite has turned towards God, and we'll see how serious his turning is in a future lesson. How sincere he is about this. In fact, he's better than David at one point. So we got Jew and Gentile both here. There's room for the Gentile among the Jewish people if they'll bless the Jewish people, which these two have done by helping David. Now we're going to finish up our last passage and finish up the list here in Chronicles with verses 42 through 47. Chronicles 11, I should say. Adinah, the son of Shiza, the Reubenite, a captain of the Reubenites, and 30 with him. Hanan, the son of Maacah, and Joshaphat, the Mithnite, Azurai, the Atharite, Shema and Uriel, the sons of Hotham, the Arite, Yediael, the son of Shimri, and Yoha, his brother, the Tizite. Eliel, the Mahavite, Uribai and Yoshaviah, the sons of Elnaam, Ithma the Moabite, Eliel in Obed, and Jaziel the Mesobite, the Mesobite. Bita. Okay, so there's a couple of outstanding people here worth noting as well. And first of all, this son of Shija, the Reubenite, this Adina, and he brought 30 more Reubenites with him. Okay, and captain of the Reubenites brought 30 with him. Now he's in the 30; they're not, but he's over them. And what? And we looked at all these places, we'd find these cities that are mentioned here. Let's use what they mean, like Aurora. Aurorite is someone from Aurora. Okay. We would have found that these cities are scattered all over Israel, all over between the 12 tribes. So some from all the 12 tribes came and are part of these mighty men, but also Gentiles. It's equal opportunity. Whoever God gave the ability to, and who was willing to submit to David and be trained, and would show, had confidence in God that showed himself outstanding, became part of these 30. And that includes this guy, Ithma, the Moabite, again, like the Ammonites. Cursed for the mistreatment, for not helping Israel in mistreatment when they as they were leaving the wilderness. And like David, descendants of some of people of illegitimate birth, and that's why they're out to be, they can't join to the 10th generation. The clock starts ticking for them when they align with David. So they can't go they can't go in, stand in the congregation. They're still loyal to David. They're loyal to God. And David himself, remember, his grandmother Ruth was a Moabite as well. So we see that God uses Jew and Gentile to carry out his purposes here. And that mix, as we've been seeing consistently, really since the time of Abraham. And different times, it varies. There's more Gentiles than Jews sometimes who are loyal to God. And this is what matters. God can use anyone mightily that will let God use them mightily. He will use you in a way that's unexpected. You may not have the physical strength of these guys, or you may not, you may not have the mental aptitude of some people. But we've seen how God has used all kinds to bring deliverance to the people of God, to carry out his will on the earth. And the greatest act of deliverance you can be involved in is bringing people the gospel. You don't have to be an evangelist. Just tell them what Messiah has done for you. Yeshua, Jesus, however you like. Tell them what he's done for you. If you'll draw near to God, he'll draw near to you. That's his promise. Start training to be there. And you may be going through a tough time. David went through a tough time, but tough times don't last. And we've seen consistently, God uses the wilderness to turn wimps into warriors. Those tough times are there so you can learn lessons that will make you successful later. And humility comes before honor, the word says. If you don't have humility, success will kill you. Remember, as we saw with Saul, Shaul, the king of Saul, the king Shaul. Strength without wisdom is destructive. And it may look like you lose it all. You're going to lose it all. But God will show up at the last minute and you probably won't. But if he did let you lose it all or appear to lose it all like Job, he'll replace it with something better later. So I encourage you, trust God, stand up for what's right. Be like some of these people like Benaniah, who will face those lion people who will jump there, who will jump in where it looks like certain death, and to bring the gospel. You you need to be brave, and that bravery comes like we saw with Amasai from the Spirit of God. Draw near to God, He'll draw near to you. Seek His purposes, and He'll give you the strength to carry them out. And you will come out the victor in the end. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.